8:34, moving to a news alert. Alec Murdaugh, the former Lowcountry attorney now charged with murder, has just arrived to court. And the hearing is in Walterboro, which is in Colleton County, about 50 miles west of Charleston. That's where Murdaugh's wife and son were both found shot to death last summer. Just last week, more than a year later, Alec Murdaugh was charged in their deaths. And Alec is the man at the center of several investigations now, but the most serious by far is these recent murder charges. Fox Carolina's own Cody Alcorn live outside of the courthouse. And Cody, you just saw Murdaugh arrive at court. He looks a lot different, too.
That's exactly right. We got a mugshot of Alec Murdaugh last week when he was indicted by that jury pool of 18 men and women here in Colleton County on 2 murder charges. But today we saw him just moments ago being pulled in an SUV into that Sally Port there and walked into this courthouse. These are some pictures I took. You can see those red tennis shoes. He now has no hair. It looks like they shaved his head. He shackled his hands, and his feet are shackled as well as he was being escorted inside this courthouse by SLED agents. Of course, he was brought from Columbia this morning and is expected inside this courtroom at 10 a.m. in front of Judge Newman. Now, keep in mind, Judge Newman is the same judge who denied Alec Murdaugh's bond back in October on some financial fraud charges. While those are detrimental, we're talking $8 million of fraud over 81 charges. These by far are the most serious, so it's almost a 99.9% chance Alec Murdaugh is not going to get a bond hearing. But what we are very interested in is what will the state do inside this courtroom? Will they give us a glimpse on what happened June 7, 2021 on that 1,700-acre hunting property known as Moselle around here, when SLED says Alec Murdaugh used 2 different weapons, a rifle and a shotgun, to kill his wife and his youngest son. Now, many experts say while it's fathomable for a man to possibly kill his wife, one thing will be hard in this courtroom: to explain how he would kill his own wife and son. His attorneys say there was no motive. You heard Jim Griffin in the top of the hour say his client had no motive to kill Maggie, his wife, or his youngest son, Paul. But what about an alibi? A lot of people wondering, where was Alec Murdaugh that night? SLED puts him apparently at that crime scene because they indicted him. They say they have enough evidence that grand jury felt they did. But in an exclusive interview back in October, Jim Griffin said this about Alec Murdaugh's whereabouts the night of June 7th, 2021.
That night, he's sitting on the bedside of his mother at her house when the coroner says these murders happen. She has dementia. There's a house sitter, caregiver, round-the-clock care, with him, and they're watching a game show television. They're watching a game show on television.
And that is what we're hearing from Jim Griffin. Now, Jim Griffin is one of Alec Murdaugh's attorneys. Of course, Senator Dick Harpootlian, also one of his attorneys here as well. And we expect dramatics inside the courtroom once this goes to court. Now, his attorneys have asked for a speedy trial, but that's not necessarily going to happen here. We expect this thing to be drawn out as the state gets their case together and ready for court. But we'll see what happens inside this 10 a.m. bond hearing. Of course, a lot of times not a lot of information is released by the prosecution. But in this case, we have gotten no information about what happened on that property except that indictment, which was very vague, only saying that a rifle and a shotgun were used, and that indictment puts Alec Murdaugh as the accused killer of his wife and youngest son. Margaret Ann.
Cody, I know that this is just a bond hearing, and as you mentioned, not much information is expected to come out of this. Can we expect to hear anything from him? We know that he's obviously a very well-versed attorney. Do you think that he'll say anything at all today?
In his last court appearance, he really said nothing. I was down in Hampton County for his very first court appearance at a bond hearing. He said nothing as well. So it's not expected he is going to talk. He may answer Judge Newman's question, yes or no. We'll see what happens with Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin if they throw out some theatrics here. We do expect to hear from the state. They're going to have 2 attorneys here for the Attorney General's office, and they will lay out a little bit of how we got to this point 13 months later. Of course, once Judge Newman does deny bond, the next couple of weeks will be important. There's a lot of questions. Were there aggravating circumstances in this case? Obviously, this is horrific. If you are convicted of killing your wife and your own son, that is aggravating circumstances. But will the state go for the death penalty here? Obviously, South Carolina hasn't put anyone to death in many years due to the death penalty here, and of course not being able to get the things they need to do that. But now we have the firing squad and the electric chair option. Those are held up in court. So again, there's a lot more to come in this case, and it's one that I'm told will be watched around the world when it goes to trial, because there are so many elements to this. As I mentioned at the top of the hour, the Murdaugh name in itself, 87 years. His grandfather and great-grandfather, top prosecutors in neighboring Hampton County. It's just a dynasty that has unraveled really since 2019, and there are so many sidebars to this story. It's hard to get to all of them, but of course we have all of that at foxcarolina.com. You can watch my full interview with Jim Griffin and really look at all of the cases surrounding this one man. I mean, again, he has 2 murder charges now, 81 charges totaling $8.5 million in fraud over the years he's accused of taking from his own clients, which he's already admitted to. So it's an unreal story, and it's really one made for TV.
It really is, Cody. I know you're going to stay on top of it this morning. We'll be checking back in with you in just a bit. That getting going at 10 o'clock. And the Murdaugh, of course, at the center of several investigations, as he mentioned, from fraud to a botched suicide attempt. All of that information and the developments you can find on foxcarolina.com.